The Emerald Bay Hotel stood atop Nob Hill, overlooking the streets of San Francisco. In the morning mist, the elegant Victorian-style red brick exterior began to catch the first rays of sunlight. Ascending the brass-railed staircase, the words, "The Emerald Bay," gleamed in gold above the solid wooden doors. Elizabeth Green had arrived at the hotel earlier than usual. Taking out her father's gold pocket watch, a cherished keepsake, she saw it was 6 o'clock. For 50 years since its opening, this hotel, while never flashy, had earned the deep trust of San Francisco's elite with its refined atmosphere and heartfelt service. "Good morning, Ms. Elizabeth," Thomas Wilson, the manager, greeted her with his usual warm smile as she stepped into the lobby. He had been an irreplaceable presence at the hotel since her father's time. "Good morning, Thomas. How are things this morning? Chef Parker is testing a new pastry recipe. It's almost time for the morning meeting." She crossed the hall under the crystal chandelier's glow, heading toward the staff room. Mary Clark, the head housekeeper, had already prepared coffee. The morning meeting was a crucial time that marked the beginning of each day at the Emerald Bay. Her father had always said, "A hotel is like a big family." Elizabeth had kept this tradition alive in her heart, even after her father passed away 10 years ago. "We received a lovely letter from Mrs. Brown yesterday," Mary reported with a smile. She particularly enjoyed the evening wine tasting. Just then, the sound of high heels echoed in the hallway, and the staff room door was roughly thrown open. Everyone's gathered so early." Catherine Green, Elizabeth's sister-in-law, appeared wearing a flashy designer suit. Her lips curved in a sardonic smile. "Good morning, Catherine." "This is unusual," Elizabeth responded in a composed voice. "Just came to check things out," Catherine said, walking around in her expensive heels on the Persian carpet. This carpet's quite worn, isn't it?" "Our guests appreciate its warmth," Elizabeth answered quietly. "Yes, it's lovely, like a countryside inn," Catherine mockingly replied before returning to the lobby. That evening, Elizabeth was having dinner with her husband, James. The wine on the table remained almost untouched. "Maybe Catherine's right, we should consider modernizing," James said with a tired expression. "This hotel has history, each part with its own meaning," Elizabeth answered calmly. However, she noticed her husband's eyes weren't meeting hers. As the fireplace flames flickered quietly, Elizabeth remembered her father's words. "The value of this hotel isn't just in its newness." Yes, this hotel had a soul. The countless memories recorded in the guest book passed down through generations proved that. Over 200 guests had gathered in the grand ballroom of the Ritz-Carlton San Francisco. It was the wedding day of Catherine's close friend. Champagne gold tablecloths were adorned with elegant white calla lilies, and the ceiling chandeliers cast soft light throughout the room. A live violin performance filled the air with graceful melodies. Outside the windows, a cool breeze from San Francisco Bay wafted between the skyscrapers. Elizabeth briefly thought of the warm atmosphere of her own hotel. At the Emerald Bay, every wedding was conducted with a family-like warmth. While never extravagant, they created special moments where hearts truly connected. Just last week, they had hosted the wedding of a local dignitary's daughter. The joy she felt when the bride's mother tearfully said, "I'm so glad we chose this hotel," still lingered in her heart. Elizabeth, along with Mary, Thomas, and other hotel staff, had been invited to the ceremony. Her pastel blue dress stood out with dignity among the other guests in their flashy attire. At her neck, a single pearl necklace inherited from her mother gleamed modestly. On her right ring finger was the ring her husband had given her on their wedding day 10 years ago. Back then, James would still look her in the eye when he spoke. "Elizabeth, it's been a while." Mrs. Brown, a familiar regular guest, approached her. Dressed in an elegant navy dress, she was one of the pillars of San Francisco society. "Last week's afternoon tea was wonderful. Your traditional scones are the best in San Francisco. And having tea by that fireplace is so comfortable for us older folks." "Thank you. Parker has been faithfully maintaining my father's recipe." As she was about to return a smile, Catherine interrupted, approaching them. "Elizabeth, your hotel could never host such a lovely wedding, could it?" Her crimson dress stood out as if she were the star of the event. Large diamonds sparkled at her neck and wrists, her flashy appearance even overshadowing the bride. Several young women around her laughed sycophantically. "Every hotel has its own charm," Elizabeth responded gently. Her voice carried the confidence gained from 10 years of management. "Oh, you think so?" Catherine said mockingly, tilting her wine glass. "But times change. Old things are destined to be discarded. Especially when abandoned by those who should protect them." Those words momentarily froze Elizabeth's spine. But she didn't let it show in her expression. That was her strength. Since childhood, her father had always said, "The most important thing in this business is to maintain composure no matter what." As the reception progressed, Elizabeth noticed her staff's unease. Mary kept glancing in her direction, and Thomas had lost his usual mild expression. Even Chef George Parker unusually hadn't touched his meal. They had worked together for so many years, becoming like a second family to Elizabeth. Across the table, her husband James was deep in conversation with his sister Catherine. There was something scheming in both their expressions. James's left hand kept adjusting his tie, his habit when nervous. Elizabeth touched her father's pocket watch. The cold metal helped her maintain her composure. After the cake-cutting ceremony, as the atmosphere in the venue reached its peak, champagne corks popped and congratulatory voices rang out. Amidst it all, Elizabeth sensed something ominous in the air. Mary whispered to her, her hands trembling slightly. "I have a strange feeling about this." "Yes, I know," Elizabeth responded quietly. She could see her reflection in the champagne glass, surprisingly composed. The pride in the hotel inherited from her father kept her spine straight. Soon, it was time for her husband's speech. Catherine approached and whispered with a meaningful smile. Her eyes gleamed with the certainty of victory. "Look forward to it." The venue lights dimmed, and a spotlight illuminated her husband. James, looking somewhat nervous, took the microphone. His hand trembled slightly. There was no trace left of the gentle husband she once knew. "I have a special announcement today." The room fell silent. Elizabeth remembered her father's teaching, "Never forget your grace, no matter what." "As our gift, I'm presenting my wife's hotel to my sister." The room erupted in murmurs. Catherine stood up with a broad smile. Her diamonds caught the spotlight, flashing sharply. Like the gleam of a victor. "You should be grateful, I'll manage it better." While everyone held their breath, Elizabeth slowly raised her wine glass and took just one sip. Thomas watched her with worried eyes. Then Mrs. Brown's voice shook with anger. "How could you?" Voices of criticism began to rise from surrounding tables. However, there was a mysterious smile on Elizabeth's face. It was a smile that held a quiet strength, as if seeing through everything. The next morning, unfamiliar luxury cars were parked at the Emerald Bay's entrance. New staff members Catherine had brought stepped out one after another. She strode into the lobby first, spreading her arms under the crystal chandelier. "Now, let's transform this old hotel with our hands." Mary stood silently in her familiar corner of the lobby. Catherine walked around confidently, like the star of a stage. Her flashy high heels pressed into the hand-woven Persian carpet. "First, we'll change all these old-fashioned uniforms to something modern and sophisticated," Catherine said, looking down at the staff. "But the guests appreciate them," Mary suggested quietly. "Be quiet. I make the decisions." Catherine's voice echoed throughout the lobby. "You people don't understand the sensibilities of the new era." By afternoon, the modernization of the reservation system had begun. The latest system Catherine had decided to implement certainly looked flashy. However, it didn't understand the complex reservation management system that had been passed down at the Emerald Bay for years. "Mrs. Brown's usual room is 307, by the window," Thomas tried to explain to the new staff. "We don't need such complicated rules. Any available room will do," Catherine declared while operating her smartphone. That evening, Mrs. Brown arrived. She had been a regular guest for over 20 years, staying in the same room every month. However, she was guided to a basement room she disliked. "This room's humidity isn't good for my joints," Mrs. Brown explained with a confused expression. "We apologize. Due to the system." The new staff member responded hesitantly. "System?" Mrs. Brown's voice trembled. "If Elizabeth were here." "Please don't mention the previous manager's name," Catherine coldly interrupted. "If you don't like it, I suggest you find another hotel." Hearing those words, Mrs. Brown's face turned pale. She left the lobby silently, her back showing deep disappointment. Catherine's reforms continued relentlessly. The traditional English afternoon tea was changed to a modern style emphasizing Instagram appeal. The scone recipe passed down from her father's time was discarded as outdated. Despite Chef Parker's protests, new menus were introduced one after another. However, the newly hired chef didn't know San Francisco's ingredients. Unable to handle the famous local Dungeness crab properly, the quality of food rapidly declined. "This is no different from frozen food," regular guests' whispers echoed in the dining room. Criticism grew louder day by day on social media. On the third morning, an envelope lay on Thomas's desk. Opening it revealed cancellation letters from VIP guests, one after another. "This hotel is no longer the Emerald Bay we knew." That afternoon, Mary submitted her resignation in tears. "I'm sorry, but I can't take it anymore." Catherine showed no sign of being fazed by the situation. "It's natural for people left behind by the times to leave. We'll target younger clients now. We'll invite influencers and hold flashy parties." However, contrary to her bravado, the hotel's management rapidly deteriorated. The new staff lacked basic hospitality skills, and complaints kept increasing. At night, loud party music now echoed through the once quiet hallways. "It's like a nightclub," complaints from neighboring residents poured in. On the fifth night, the trigger event occurred. The influencers Catherine had invited removed the portrait of Elizabeth's father, the founder, from the hallway, calling it old-fashioned. The next morning, the reservation system completely crashed. Due to a bug in the new system, all reservation data was lost. A line of furious guests formed at the front desk, and chaos reached its peak. "Leave it to me." Catherine let out a loud laugh. But her eyes were already swimming. Even her high-end brand suit seemed somehow distorted. "Whose fault is this?" she muttered to no one in particular. Could it be that person? At that moment, a taxi stopped at the Emerald Bay's main entrance. James jumped out in a panic. His face had aged noticeably in this 1 week. "Catherine, something terrible has happened." And then came the fateful 7th morning. San Francisco was wrapped in an unusually cold fog. Catherine and James stood dumbfounded in front of the Emerald Bay. A piece of paper posted on the hotel's door fluttered slightly in the morning breeze. "Due to the simultaneous resignation of all staff, operations are suspended as of today." "Why is no one here?" Catherine's voice echoed through the silent street. Her luxury brand suit was wrinkled, her perfect makeup now smeared. "What's going on?" James's voice trembled. The arrogant expression had vanished from his face, replaced by deep anxiety. When the two rushed into the hotel, the usual vitality had disappeared like a lie. The morning coffee aroma, staff greetings, warm conversations with regular guests, all gone. An envelope lay on the front desk. With trembling hands, they opened it, and a photograph slipped out. It was from 10 years ago, commemorating the day Elizabeth inherited management from her father. A warm smile captured with all the staff. On the back, in her father's handwriting, the true value of a hotel lies in its people. "This is..." James's voice trailed off. Just then, quiet footsteps echoed in the lobby. Elizabeth approached with her usual elegant bearing. Her pastel-colored suit unchanged from a week ago. "I had personal contracts with all the staff," her voice was calm but firm. "That's impossible." Catherine's face turned pale. "They are my family. Not yours." Elizabeth slowly approached the lobby fireplace. There sat the old guest book, unchanged since her father's time. Opening it revealed careful signatures of regular guests spanning generations. "This past week, I've been preparing a new hotel," Elizabeth quietly began explaining. "I've been secretly renovating another old mansion on Nob Hill." "You mean..." James's voice trembled. "Yes. I had already spoken with all the staff and regular guests. Since the day of the wedding." Like a flashback, the events of a week ago replayed in Catherine's mind. The meaning behind Elizabeth quietly drinking her wine. The staff's restlessness. Why regular guests kept canceling. All the mysteries suddenly made sense. But the ownership of this hotel. Catherine clung to her last hope. "Yes, you're right," Elizabeth smiled. "This hotel is indeed yours. But the soul of the Emerald Bay was something that could never be transferred." Just then, cheers could be heard from outside the hotel. Looking out the window, all the Emerald Bay staff had gathered. Mary, Thomas, Chef Parker, and many employees. Behind them stood regular guests, including Mrs. Brown. "The new hotel opens next week," Elizabeth said, walking to the window. "Of course, all existing reservations have been transferred there. We will create new history with Ms. Elizabeth." Thomas's voice rang from outside. Witnessing this scene, Catherine staggered and collapsed into a chair. Her expensive heels clicked emptily against the floor. "But why?" Her voice trembled. "Why didn't you protest back then?" "In business, it's important not to get emotional," Elizabeth quoted her father's teaching. "Besides, I knew. The value of this hotel wasn't just in the building." James stared at his wife, lost for words. The days when they shared dreams together now felt like distant memories. "Elizabeth, You had debts to your sister from failed investments," Elizabeth cut off her husband's words. "But you were wrong. What's important isn't the immediate cash value. It's the relationships of trust this hotel has built." Just then, police sirens approached from outside. "Oh, yes," Elizabeth added as if suddenly remembering. "I hear there was a massive leak of guest personal information from yesterday's reservation system issues. The authorities consider it a serious matter." The last color drained from Catherine's face. Her luxury brand bag fell carelessly to the floor. "This is the price of trying to change everything without understanding tradition," Elizabeth's voice rang out, quiet but dignified. Then she slowly began walking toward the lobby doors. Outside, the morning mist was clearing, and soft light was streaming into San Francisco Bay. The history of the Emerald Bay would end here. But its soul would live on in a new place. Now, let's begin our new step forward. When Elizabeth opened the door, thunderous applause erupted from the waiting staff and regular guests. 1 month later, San Francisco was bathed in soft sunlight. A new sign gleamed on a Victorian-style building even higher up Nob Hill. "The Emerald Legacy." From this location, with an even better view than the former Emerald Bay, San Francisco Bay spread out before them. In the morning mist, the silhouette of Alcatraz Island emerged. Elizabeth stood in the quiet lobby before opening. Hand-woven Persian carpets, crystal chandeliers, and comfortable chairs by the fireplace. Everything retained the same warmth as before. However, it was a new arrangement that also cherished this building's unique character. "Ms. Elizabeth," Thomas rushed in, unusually excited. "I have the reservation report. We're fully booked for the first month," he proudly announced. "Most are from our regular guests." Elizabeth smiled. While hanging her father's photograph in a place befitting the new location, she quietly said, "Here, we'll create new history again." Yes, all the staff responded with bright expressions. Meanwhile, the former Emerald Bay stood silent. Catherine's reckless management had left deeper scars than expected. The personal information leak was widely reported, and she faced legal consequences. "This is a serious case of negligence," the prosecutor stated sternly. "It has severely damaged customer trust." Her former appearance in luxury brands was nowhere to be seen. Now in modest clothing, she spent her days in her family home's guest house. Even her former entourage had completely abandoned her. I was wrong, she whispered to the fog outside her window. Tradition, it's so easy to destroy, but building it up is so terribly difficult. Collection notices from banks piled up on her desk. The payments for the expensive systems introduced under the name of a modernization weighed heavily on her. James, too, paid a harsh price. Having completely lost credibility at his company, he was removed from important projects. Former colleagues now pretended not to see him. The man who betrayed his family's trust, such words circulated throughout the office. He sat at his desk, staring at his wedding ring. Memories with Elizabeth flashed through his mind like a moving picture show. The days they discussed the hotel's future together. The times he was genuinely moved by her sincere work ethic. What a fool I've been. Divorce papers had already arrived at his desk. Elizabeth's signature was as neat and beautiful as ever. Meanwhile, new traditions were taking root at the Emerald Legacy. Chef Parker had partnered with a local culinary school to start a training program for young chefs. Under the belief that tradition only has meaning when passed on to the next generation, he focused on discovering new talent. Mary worked with more enthusiasm than ever as the trainer for new staff. Our work isn't just about service. It's about building emotional bonds with our guests. That's the most important lesson I learned from Ms. Elizabeth. The morning meetings had an even warmer atmosphere than before. All staff members were bound by stronger ties, having overcome that week of trials together. It's all thanks to you all, Elizabeth never forgot to express her gratitude. Mrs. Brown had become an honorary advisor to the new hotel, making sure to visit for afternoon tea at least once a week. The scones are still the best, she would smile by the fireplace as always. But the view is even more wonderful than before. Elizabeth had also started new initiatives. She began offering affordable wedding packages for young couples. I want more people to experience a memorable special day, she explained. Our tradition of heartfelt hospitality shouldn't be limited to just a select few. True to her words, various couples began visiting the new wedding venue. Elizabeth sometimes personally consulted with brides. Leave your special day to us. These words from her always brought reassured expressions to the brides' faces. Trust was steadily being passed on to a new generation. One day, about a month after opening, a letter arrived. It was from Catherine. Dear sister, I'm truly sorry. Looking at the apology written in trembling handwriting, Elizabeth quietly took up her pen. It takes courage to acknowledge one's mistakes. I sincerely support your new beginning. After finishing her reply, Elizabeth stood by the window. The evening cityscape was bathed in orange. This new story had only just begun. For generations to come, this hotel would continue to weave people's precious memories. Father, she looked up at the sky. We chose the right path, didn't we? At that moment, the sunset broke through the clouds, wrapping the lobby in warm light. As if it were her father's response. Ms. Elizabeth, Thomas quietly called out. It's almost time for sunset tea. Thank you, Thomas. She walked toward the kitchen with her usual graceful steps. Another day was about to begin. Above the fireplace, the founder's photograph smiled quietly.